Hi, viewers. Welcome to another episode of the Nanaya Yabua Show. In today's episode, I would like to say a very big thank you to the author of Tales of Jideofor, Farastein. Ehis. Yes,
Thank you
your
very much
last
for
name is
having
also.
me. More Kwenye.
Thank you. More kwenye, more kwenye, more kwenye. Yes, yes. So, my handsome young Nigerian author writes based in Nigeria. And his book is really telling, it's inspirational, it's also faith and spiritually driven. The book serves to bridge the gap between the enslaved people, enslaved ancestors, and the African continent. However, before I delve into it, telling his story of how it came to be, I would like Farastein to tell us who he is. And the previous first question is, what is it like to be you? Who are you?
It feels very nice to be a East, to be Farastein. I always say I'm in the path of living my dreams. So each day the vision gets a little clearer than the previous day. Just as you had mentioned, my name is Eis, but
Mhm.
Eis is not my Igbo name. Eis is my Edo name. Eis is my Benin name. My Igbo name is Undudi. I'm
Undudi.
fasting. Yeah, Undudi. It means there is life.
Undudi,
That's the
there's
literal,
life.
yes, that's the literal translation in Igbo language.
Mhm.
Farastein is my pen name, and it was formed from a merger and an agglutination of the name Faraday and Einstein from my high school days about a decade ago.
Trust the African to put names together, Faraday and Einstein
Einstein,
together.
yeah.
Yes, yes. So let's talk about a little bit of growing up in Nigeria, your motivation to actually engage in the art of writing, and most importantly, being a storyteller.
Nigeria, of course, to every nation there's the little pros and cons to living in Nigeria, but I would say all around Nigeria is quite nice. One of the best places to actually be born in and live. Contrary to the opinions a lot of foreigners must have of Nigeria and the rest of West Africa, but I believe I believe Nigeria is a very blessed land. It's the reason we're so blessed with human and mineral resources. There's a reason why. So Nigeria is one of the best places in the world to be born into, to grow. Our society is quite blessed. I believe in the happiness scale, we're probably some of the happiest people in the world. I believe Nigerians are probably one of the happiest people in the world. Comedy is our everyday culture here in Nigeria. And
Life is seen as a comedy.
yes, exactly, exactly. It's so easy to draw motivation from my Nigerian society. In fact,
Mhm.
much of the storytelling I did in Tales of Jideofor, the motivation for it is coming from people in my own life, people in the society of Nigeria, and how
Mhm.
life in general in Nigeria is.
Mhm. Yes. In a previous conversation, you did say that the characters that you built the story around are actually your family members.
Yes,
Do
yes.
they espouse similar characters as what you've described them to be, or
Yes, no, just like I had said before, in many ways, Tales of Jideofor is a history of my hometown, Ila. So
Mhm.
the characters are especially on the very first part, Africa, my Africa. The
Mhm.
names and the characters readers will meet in Africa, my Africa are
Mhm.
actually people from Ila. And as you had mentioned, the main characters in part one, Africa, my Africa, is Jideofor, his parents, and his siblings, Ifoma and Chijoke, which are names of my three siblings, Jideofor, Ifoma, and Chijioke. And in many ways, the characters of the should I say the nuances, the behavior of the characters in the story is very much similar to the behavior and the nuances of my siblings in real life. In part one, Africa My Africa, there's this scene of a
Yes.
prophecy surrounding Jideofor's birth,
Yes.
where his mother was chased by a masquerade.
Yes.
Funny enough, my actual elder sibling, who is named Jideofor, that is
Mm-hmm.
how exactly he got to be named Jideofor. When my
Okay.
mom was pregnant with him, she was
Yes.
chased by a masquerade in the village and she fell down, which was an abomination because the understanding in my own tradition, in the setting of my village, the traditional understanding is that a pregnant woman is sacred. So
Mm-hmm.
no harm must come to a pregnant woman or a child in that state of pregnancy. So,
Mm-hmm.
but just as he had read in Tales of Jideofor, after the occasion of her being stumbled by a masquerade was so the name Jideofor would be revealed to her. And that
Mm-hmm.
is exactly what had happened with my own mom too. After
Okay.
when they had when they had gone for the cleansing and all of that, they gave her a
Yes.
prophecy that the child she would deliver will be male and it should
Okay.
be named Jideofor. And
What does
exactly as
Jideofor
foretold,
mean?
Jideofor or in Igbo setting, in the Igbo culture, is the staff of authority, usually
Okay.
carved usually of bronze, ivory, or
Mm-hmm.
wood. But
Mm-hmm.
Ofo is a symbol of authority.
Okay.
So each family has an Ofo,
Yes.
and the oldest son, that's the first son of the family, the
Yes.
Ofo flows from father to first son,
Okay.
father to first son. So my
Yes.
other brother is the first son of our family. My
Mm-hmm.
dad is the first son
Of
of
his
his own
family.
grandparents. Yes, so
Okay.
the offer of the family always moves from first son to first son to first son. So
Mm-hmm.
Jideofor means take the offer. You
Oh,
understand?
it's like
So
passing the
since
baton on.
yeah, passing the
Yes.
baton. So my dad is
Okay.
passing his position as the first son to his own
Two.
first son. Yes, so
Mm,
he's handing over the offer to his own first
yes.
son. Yes.
Yes. So with every author, there is not only there is what inspires them to actually write. And my interest when it comes to you, first then as the author of Tales of Jideofor, is why, with all the stories out there, as a Nigerian living in Nigeria, you write a story of a historical narrative of slavery from Africa to the Caribbean and then thereafter. What was the inspiration for writing Tales of Jideofor?
Well, I'm a history buff. I'm always I've always been interested in history and still am. I'm always fascinated by history. I have a
Yes.
personal belief and a personal saying that if you cannot remember the past, if you cannot remember where you are coming from, then you cannot exactly know where you are headed. It's as
Mhm.
if maybe you're driving to Toronto and you have no idea where you're coming from. How can we sure you know you're headed to
Did
Toronto?
I tell you I live in Toronto?
so
Yes.
so being a history lover, I've always been fascinated by history. I've been particularly interested in the slave trade because
Mhm.
I believe that era was crucial, not just to Africans alone, but to the Europeans.
Mhm.
If not for the slavery, I believe the Industrial Revolution that transformed Europe in the 19th century may never have happened, probably.
Mhm.
So I believe the slave trade history is very much crucial to the relationship between Africans and Europeans. It's very much crucial to all of the problem of racism we have
Yes.
in today's world. All of that is stemming from that era. So that era is quite unique in
Mhm.
the timeline of history. And I've
Mhm.
always wanted to read a tale from that era. and I couldn't really find it. So, and of course, there's this saying that when you really want to read a story and you can't find it, then you should
You
write it yourself.
you write
So I
it
took it
yourself.
upon myself. I took it upon myself that I would write Tales of Jideofor. The idea for Tales of Jideofor had actually come to me, I think, in 2017. I had a dream once. I had a dream. It's quite fuzzy in my memory now, but basically, the dream was about slave trade. So it felt so real to me, and I was quite fascinated. Since then, it implanted this idea for me that I need to do a telling of that dream. So from there, Tales of Jideofor was fleshed out.
Okay. It seems the spirituality or your subconscious, the guy
Yeah,
told you it needs to be written,
yeah.
and so therefore you
In my
have.
own way, I always say that Jideofor Jideofor wanted the story to be told, just as if I'm a channel for a story to get to people all over the world.
I think that is one of the things when I read the book, that the strength of the spirituality in the book cannot be, how do we call it, overlooked.
Yeah,
In that you speak of these three women, one pregnant, who refused to be enslaved and, you know, jump overboard and kill themselves, and the
themselves.
stripping
Yeah.
even of themselves and the curses being laid. Maybe some may not believe in it. Of the human, spirit to be
Yes,
free is really strong,
yeah.
and that imagery even is so daunting on me that when I read that, tears flowed, because personally I'm a labor and delivery nurse. That's what I
Oh,
do for a living. And when you read and see that there's a pregnant woman with the hand, or both with other two women with their hands on the pregnancy, which is sacred, the
yes.
sacredness of that life, jumping overboard. Um,
Overboard.
I believe what I want to ask you is, how influential is the narrative of the Igbo landing in this telling?
Very much so, of course. I've read of the tales of the Igbo landing. I believe it was in 1804.
Y-
But
yes,
in my
thereabout.
research, yeah, thereabout. In my research into the transatlantic slave trade from the 15th century when it began in the late, that's in the 1490s when it actually began. So the early 19th century when it actually ended, I came to realize that Igbo slaves were quite peculiar, especially Igbo slaves taken to the Caribbean. There are many terms in many Caribbean languages, especially in Jamaica. In fact, it was part of the reason why I've chosen Jamaica to be the country Jideofor will be taken to, because there's this particular connection between Nigeria and Jamaica, very much so, especially
Can you share
connecting
one or
Igbo.
two words in Igbo which are still in Jamaican, how do we call it,
Yeah,
dialect?
yeah, yeah. I know one. I know one. One is on the top of my mind now. In Jamaican patois, unu means you guys,
Ah,
and in Igbo, unu still means you guys. So let's say in Igbo, say unu nabia means are you guys coming?
yes.
Yeah. So in Jamaica, unu still means you guys, you in the plural form. So there's this connection between the Igbo culture and in Nigeria, and how the slavery are taking that element of the Igbo culture to the Caribbean, especially to Jamaica as well. In fact, in Jamaica and other parts of the Caribbean, since Igbo slaves tend to be lighter skinned,
Yes.
even in today's Nigeria, it
Yes.
doesn't take too much to notice that
Yes.
Igbo folks tend to be lighter than everyone else. Yeah, so
That is for sure.
so since Igbo slaves tend to be lighter,
Mm-hmm.
Slaves of a lighter skin tone were
Mm-hmm.
generally referred to as red Igbo.
Red
That was in
Igbo.
Jamaica. Yes, I believe
Oh, okay.
since this very day in Jamaica, red Igbo is still a part of the Jamaican patois in reference to a light-skinned African. And
Okay.
In Nigeria, I believe I'd try to infuse that in the storytelling as well.
Yes.
That in Nigeria, especially in southern Nigeria where I stay, we will always use the term Oyibo. You've
Yes.
definitely heard of that term before.
Yes.
Oyibo, we use Oyibo to refer to either light skinned Africans or Europeans themselves. And the
Mm,
term Oyibo is actually coming from Igbo. It's actually Oyibo. It means Igbo person. So it's
mm,
so it was from Oyimbo that
mm,
the Jaws, the Shekiri, the Urobos, and other coastal tribes by the
mm-hmm.
coast came about the term
Borrow the
Oyibo.
term. Yes.
Yeah, so it's
Now,
actually
thanks to
Oyibo.
Nollywood, it is universal. Oyibo
It's
Pepe.
a universal term. Yeah, exactly.
There is a white Oyibo
Exactly.
even on Instagram.
Yeah, thank you. There's a musician even, I believe, called White Oyibo.
Ah,
I believe it's the same one called White Oyibo. He's a comedian and a musician. He has a few tracks to his name.
okay. Okay.
Yeah.
See. Mm-hmm.
So
Wow,
it is
this
a
is
common term. Most people
yeah.
have no idea of the origin of that very term Oyibo. They have no
Mm-hmm.
idea that it's coming from Oyigbo, which means Igbo person. Since Igbo people tend to be lighter skinned than
Yes.
other Africans.
Yes. Wow, this is powerful. This is great. I think previously I did a video on Akan words in Jamaican patois, and
Yeah, yeah.
because I'm Akan, I can identify those words. That's why I was asking you if you could share some of
If they
the
are still, yeah, yeah.
yes, the Igbo words still in
Jamaican
Jamaican
patois.
patois. Yes, that is beautiful. Wow. Slavery is only of the mind, it is not the rope that binds my people. You're talking about dreams and vision. Let's talk about that. What is the significance of dreams and visions within the story as as a concept of hope or within the story for the African?
Well, dreams to me, I believe to science, to the scientific understanding,
Mhm,
dreams are quite important. They are like a window into your subconscious mind.
mhm,
Oftentimes, your dreams are a mirror reflection of your everyday life in reality. So, dreams are almost like a window into your soul, sort of. And just like I told you, certain aspects of the storytelling for Tales of Jideofor had
mhm,
come to me in my dream. Is the
mhm,
reason why Tales of Jideofor is not just a tale of history or a
mhm,
tale of spirituality, it's also a tale of dreams. In
mhm,
fact, the dream scenes are so important that myself and my publishers decided that we would create a different color, a different text color, blue, to
mhm,
separate the dream scenes
mhm,
from the everyday reality. And this will carry on in because Tales of Jideofor is part of a trilogy. The
mhm,
second novel will be Once Upon a Lifetime. Here we'll get a deeper understanding of
mhm.
Jideofor's life. Although
I'll be
Tales of
waiting.
Jideofor, although Tales of Jideofor is set in the past,
Yes.
Once Upon a Lifetime is set in the future. Tales of Jideofor is set in the past about 300 years ago.
Mhm.
Once Upon a Lifetime will be set in the future about 300 years from now.
So that would be
So
an
by
Afrofuturistic.
yes, yes, exactly,
Okay,
exactly, exactly,
great,
exactly.
great. In your writings, as much as we're talking about spirituality and visions, you also talk about the chi, the body. You know that the body is our chi's attire.
Attire, yes.
So, within an Igbo concept of chi, could you break it down for those who don't know, who don't understand this aspect of
Yeah.
chi? Yes.
No, in Igbo culture, there are two understandings of what chi means. The first and the most basic understanding is very much similar to the Christian understanding of what soul means, especially the Catholic understanding of what soul is. The idea is that you are a soul. You are the breath of God, the very breath that God had breathed into Adam. It's the same breath that fills our lungs till this very day. So we are an aspect of the divine. We are, in a sense, in the Igbo understanding, we are God in human form. But we do not realize this because this our body is like our, should I say, almost like a cage for our chi, like an attire. That's why I've compared it to an attire. So when we die, we will lose our body, of course, but it's just like a clothes. It doesn't affect your chi when you lose your body, because when you reincarnate in the future, in the future lifetimes, you will take up new bodies, but it's still the same chi. It will still be the same chi in the new body as well. And the second understanding of chi in Igbo cosmogony and Igbo traditions is that your chi is your personal God. Your chi is your higher self. Your chi is your guardian angel, which is not very far from the Christian understanding of what a guardian angel is. So your chi, in the Igbo understanding, the idea is that your chi is your self, your previous incarnation, your past life. So your past lives are from the realm of the spirits, are trying to help you to model your very current life. They don't want you to make the mistakes
That you've
you
made
had
it.
made here that you've made before in the past. So they are helping to direct you to fulfill your, because the idea is that you keep on reincarnating on earth because you have a mission here. You still have something that tethers you to life on earth. When you are done with all of your missions here, the Igbo understanding is that you become an ancestor.
Yes.
You no longer come into life on earth anymore. Instead, you aid your descendants that are still alive, that still have missions to fulfill from the spiritual realm. That is why in Africa, I believe it's quite common in African culture, in
It is.
Ashanti and this, there's this belief in ancestor worship. The ancestors
Yes.
have a similar place to the court of saints in the Catholic faith. So the way, let's say, you would pray to, just as the Catholic Church, maybe because I'm Catholic, I was born and raised, so I'm quite familiar with the Catholic faith. I was born and raised Roman Catholic. So just like you have the court of saints in the Catholic Church, maybe you have something missing, there's a saint for that. You have, you're looking for wealth, there's a saint for that. The same way, that is the African understanding too. You have something missing, you have an ancestor for that who was quite good at probably discovering and finding things out when they were alive. You're looking for wealth, you're looking for health. You have an ancestor in charge of that who probably in his own lifetime was wealthy, was healthy, and blah blah blah. That is the basic understanding.
Well,
So
well, when it comes to Christianity and traditional systems, I think there's a split in the sense that ours is cyclical, that
yes, yes, exactly.
there's a continuation, that from
Yes,
birth to death to ancestry, you don't
yes.
die and wait for a heaven, but you still are purposeful when you
In
pass on.
yes,
But within the Christian
exactly.
aspect, or as you say, the Catholic aspect, you have to be a certain person to become a saint,
A
or they
saint, yes,
whatever sanctify you for people to pray to you. But ours is not like that. So
yes,
I
yes. True,
I
true,
just had to come in, and equally,
true, true.
born, I was indoctrinated with the Catholic faith as well. But that is a different story. Let's stick to
Sorry for
African
another day. Yes,
spirituality.
yes.
As I say, when I eat my amala, or my how do you call it, face the wall,
Eba.
kukunte, or eba, it touches my spirit. When I eat rice, I don't feel that. When I drink palm wine, I'm in heaven. Yes, when you take palm wine to heaven, they will say, no, it's a sin. Let me stay and drink my palm
I remember I saw an advert once where they said, "There's no beer in heaven. Drink it now." So it was it was at the entrance of a beer parlor. There's no
Allow
beer in
me to
heaven. Drink
enjoy
it now.
myself.
Yes, drink it now.
Okay, all right. I think one of the things that normally I do in the beginning is to ask about your background and thing, but we miss that. You you not a writer by profession, as you went to school for, you had a master's or a BA in how do you call it, writing.
B engine, a Bachelor of Engineering
But
in.
did you always know you would write? You be a
Mm,
storyteller.
I remember while I was quite young, almost let's say 6 or 7 years, I always used to tell because Chijoke is the last born of my
Yeah.
family,
Mm-hmm.
and in Tales of Jideofor as well is the last born
As part of
of the
the
family.
family.
Yeah, yes. So my younger brother Chijoke has always been fascinated with my stories. When I had written Tales of Jideofor, he was so happy. When he was quite young, but because I'm just 3 years older than him, so let's say while I was 7, he was 4.
Mm-hmm.
So he would always tell me to tell him stories.
Mm-hmm.
Then while we were quite young, he was always
Yes.
interested in my storytelling. And he's
Yes.
probably one of my biggest fans till date. So he's
Eh,
one of the first
mm-hmm.
audience I've always had, somebody to listen and hear my story. But in a sense, I've always been fascinated with storytelling. I always love the deeper message because I believe stories always have a surface meaning and a deeper message when you look underneath. There are
Mm-hmm.
usually two sides to the story. So I've always loved stories. Even though I'm an engineer, back in the days, and even to this very day, I still have a substantial amount of following on my Facebook page from all over the world. And in fact, they were part of the motivation for me to write Tales of the Dog because when I would write my little articles on Facebook, they will
Mm-hmm.
be so amazed, and strangers would ask, people I've never met, they would ask, where can they get my work? So I would say, I've never published anything. No. In fact, I'm an engineer. They'll be like, oh, that I should actually look into, that I have the gift
Yeah.
of writing, I shouldn't let it waste.
Yes.
So when I
You know,
actually really, yes, go on, please.
what I was about to say is the beauty of what I love about Africa is that you get doctors, you get people who are natural, who here we don't see as going to school for writing, being
Yes,
writers. There are,
yes.
in fact, there are so
From
many,
all walks of
yes,
life,
from all
pastors,
walks of life.
engineers, lawyers. I know Nigeria. I remember the last Jamaican I had met always said she had said Jamaican and she had said Nigerians are busybodies. That is only in Nigeria. That in Nigeria it will not be rare to see a doctor who has a supermarket,
Yes,
which is not so
I
in
think
Jamaica. That
it is the entrepreneurship.
yeah, yeah,
It's the
yes, exactly.
entrepreneurship and the business mindedness.
There's this business, especially of the Igbo people. It is very peculiar of the Igbo people. They are very business minded. So she had told me that
Yes.
Nigerians are quite a diverse people, that we don't tend to limit ourselves. In fact, because I had met
Yes.
the Jamaican High Commissioner to Nigeria, that was in March in Abuja. And he told me exactly the same thing. That
Yes.
ever since he's
And
in Nigeria, because he came to Nigeria in 2019, that is is so amazed at our Nigerian society. One person can be four portfolios. There'll be a pastor, there'll be a doctor, there'll be a writer, there'll be a writer in the same person. So I told him that it is in Nigeria, we call it the hustling spirit in Nigeria. You have to hustle.
uh,
You have to
I,
hustle.
aside from that, you mentioned a key thing that we see. that we are not only composed of one thing, we have
Yes.
so many, and tapping into these other parts
Yes.
of us which makes us whole. With your characters, you say they are part of your family. Now, the Mary Jane character, some of them historical characters like the Queen Nanny in the book,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the Mary Jane character, where did you bring her from?
Get the name from?
Yes,
Well, there's a funny backstory behind Mary Jane. No,
then I'm
Mary
interested.
Jane is Mary Jane is code word for the herb.
Oh,
You know,
yes, yes, actually, yes, 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 yes.
some some people call it MJ, some people call it Mary Jane. So
Ah,
I ensure that her surname will be Flowers.
oh,
That is why she's called Mary Jane Flowers. So, but
okay, okay,
we
okay,
had
okay.
because we should I say part of the blueprint I had modeled Tales of Jideofor after is the love story between Jack and Rose in the movie Titanic. I believe you've seen it. Almost the entire
Yes,
world has seen
yes,
Titanic
yes, yes.
before. No, in many ways, the love story between Jideofor and Mary Jane is comparable to the love story between Jack and Titanic, and Jack and Rose in the Titanic. Because in the Titanic, Jack and Rose are from two different worlds.
Yes, the
Rose
rich
is
and the poor.
from, yeah, the rich and the poor. In Tales of Jideofor, Jideofor is from Africa, Mary
Mm-hmm.
Jane is from Europe.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and the way it was in Titanic, that should I say, in the Titanic, we have this focus on Jack, but the
Mm-hmm.
story is actually speaking of Rose. That's
Yes.
why Jack had to die in the end, and readers will come to understand better in Once Upon a Lifetime. That's the follow-up story. So, although the story is Tales of Jideofor, but in a sense, it also focuses on Mary Jane.
You
Jideofor
know
had to
what I
die.
was so interested in, that when they escape, the narratives of being in love and their
Yeah.
escape, and then what becomes of the child that Mary Jane bears.
No, you get to find out. You just have to be patient. you
Okay, that's the
you
Nigerian
find out
side
in
of me. I'm
2024.
impatient. The Ghana side is patient.
You find
You
out
know,
in 2024 in Once Upon a Lifetime.
okay,
That
once upon
let
a
me just give you a
lifetime.
little tip of Once Upon a Lifetime. Once Upon a Lifetime is based in, just like I told you, 300 years in the future, but it is
Yes.
based in a world after World War Three. So
Hey,
humanity no longer lives on the surface,
okay.
and much of life as we know it, there's no need to
Mm-hmm.
go to work. There's no need. The most of what we understand as everyday reality is very different
Mm-hmm.
because much of society is being run by AI, artificial intelligence, as we are seeing happening in our very before. Very soon,
Also in
AI will do
Africa,
all of this. No, no, no,
in the
not
bush.
yet, boy. But eventually,
Mm-hmm.
I remember while I was younger, let's say 2005, when I was 10 years old, if you had told me that over a screen I could talk to somebody in Canada, I would told you
Yes.
to get out of here, you little witch. But today,
So this is not
but today,
witchcraft.
but today the reality is it is no
Mm.
longer witchcraft. So who's to say what's going to happen in the next 20 years?
That is
If
true.
AI
That
can,
is
yes, so you
that
guys will
is
get to me, Once Upon a Lifetime will be a window of my own understanding of what will happen in the future. And again, like Tales of Jideofor, most of the themes, most of the plot lines for the story have already come to me from my sleep, from my dreams, because I always
from.
pay attention to my dreams.
Okay. Wow. That is wonderful. Was this interview part of the dream? That's a joke.
Who
Let-
knows?
Let's come to one of the characters in your book, and Ada Igwe. We did talk about her. So let's talk about Ada Igwe. her character, her position in society, the
Yeah.
uh, the systems of slavery or enslavement of freeborn
Yes,
Africans
of within the
um,
continent. Yeah.
within the continent as well.
Well, Adaigwe is definitely a peculiar character. She was born out of an actual lady I know in real life, a lady I had worked with. So
Yes.
Adaigwe it literally translates to iron lady.
Oh, I thought
Iron, yes,
Igwe
iron
was
lady.
chief.
No, no, Igwe, no, just as it is in a lot of African languages.
Yes.
They are, I believe in English, we call them homophones, sabi? That
Okay, okay.
one sound representing different
Two or
meanings.
three minutes. Yes, yes,
Yes, just the same sound having multiple meanings. So
yes.
Igwe, Igwe is also the god of metal. Igwe is
Okay.
also the title for kings, for royalty, as
Yes,
well as Obi, as well as Eze. These are
yes,
titles for royalty. So it's also a word for iron because the reason the Obi is actually hailed as Igwe is that
yes,
is the, how should I say it now, is the iron of the society, so to say, because metallurgy and metal working in the ancient days was often affiliated with magic, was often
yes.
affiliated with the Dibias and the kings and the Ezes. So even in today's world, most of us have very little or to almost no understanding of how metals are formed. How is the iron ore processed? How is steel made? It is still almost magic in today's
Yes,
world to the average person. So
yes,
in ancient
yes,
Africa, it was synonymous to magic. So
yes.
Adaigwe, in a sense, because I really wanted to tell, because there's this quote that hurt people end up hurting people.
That
Adaigwe,
uh,
as yes,
end up hurting yourself. Is that it?
it's true,
Yes,
true,
end up
true.
hurting
They
yourself.
end up,
Yes,
they end up hurting others and eventually end up hurting themselves.
yes, yes.
So the idea is that the character for Adaigwe came to me just like I told you from an actual lady I know in real life, and I've met a number of ladies that are like that. Something has happened to them, and the hate they had formed from that experience, that negative experience that happened to them, they had let that hate consume them. And eventually, when you let hate consume you, you become like the object of whatever you hate. You become exactly like the things you hate. It is shocking to, but that is eventually what happens. Let's say, like, how should I put it now? Let's say you have, you're exposed to racism,
Yes.
so you have this view of white folks. You end up hating white folks. So every white person you see is a racist, just because of the hate that is inborn in you that you are spilling off on others in a sense. Yeah, that
Yes.
your shadow self has been messed up in such a way that that hate is now what directs your life, no longer love anymore. You can't find love. And without love, you can't find peace, can't find bliss, can't find fulfillment. So at that way, it's just that, it's that character. And in today's Nigeria, with the rise of feminism,
Yes.
especially this fourth wave of feminism that are turning women, in a sense, in my own opinion, into bitter women. All of this is stemming from men hate. So,
I wouldn't say it. I don't want us to kind
to
of
delve
go
into the,
off. Yes,
yes, to
but
go
I
off
wouldn't
into,
say it's man hate. But within our culture and society, and especially having a strong traditional patriarchal system, it makes it really difficult to unravel some of the tentacles. And
no, true,
also,
true.
because our culture is so steep, having the listening ear of the men, sometimes the men think you are, usurping their manhood, or, rendering them. So you kind of button heads with male egos. I don't want to delve so much into it because that's
Into
not
that,
what
yeah.
we are really talking about. but
True, true.
I fully understand what you are saying.
Where I'm
But
coming
sometimes
from.
it's
So
also trauma. The
definitely
experiences are often traumatic experiences that psychologically has not been able to
healed.
resolve.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
And I always
And
say that Africa has a lot of trauma.
till this very day, there's still trauma in our society, and
Trauma
we
for
are
the
still
human
living
being, for the land, for women,
for
for men.
our culture, for our way of life in general.
Yes, 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 yes. Maybe we all need to have some Igbo herb.
True, true, true. To help calm us down,
And
because
I even need one.
definitely, 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 definitely,
So, guys, if you
definitely.
have joined us, I'm actually having a conversation with Farastein, the author of Tales of Jideofor, which you can find on all available platforms, Barnes and Noble, Amazon, wherever you get your book, you can actually get a copy of Tales of Jideofor. And if you've been following, the book is actually written from an African perspective of a young man or a young boy that was freeborn, enslaved, and sent to the Caribbean, and who is of Igbo background. And as you can tell, the Caribbean and around the world, wherever you see Black people, we are different Black people brought together through enslavement. And there are remnants of our history, our language, our food, our cultures all over the world. And just
True.
if you don't know Afrobeat, Afrobeat is reinventing the
No, I
back.
believe everyone should know Afrobeat by now, except you are living under a rock.
Whether they like it or not, Afrobeat has come to stay.
No,
To stay.
Afrobeat is the music now. In the coronation of King Charles, I mean, Tiwa
Ah,
Savage was part
yes,
of the highlight.
yes,
Uh,
yes. That is true. That is true. Um, so if you've not subscribed, please do so. If you want a copy of this book, Google his name, you will find him and you can get a copy and support a young brother. He is doing marvelous. Now, when I was reading
thank
the book and
you.
as we having this conversation, you already know I'm also your fan. Because it's written in such a culturally grounded place that aside of you living in Warri, like you told me, yes, of Igbo origin, not many of this generation even still know about our culture
Culture,
as
true,
deeply
true.
as you merged into the book, especially of reincarnation and of dreams. How did you go about this, the research that you did to
I had to
actually
do.
publish this? Yes.
Well, lucky for me, although I was born and brought up in Warri, as it is in Igbo culture, there's this on 1 December. That's basically the Igbo concept for the Yule tide for Christmas period.
Mm,
So every
okay.
Christmas, it's almost like a modern Igbo tradition now
Mhm.
that Igbo people would come home for Christmas.
Oh, yes.
So, so from Warri, we would always go to Ila. Warri, Warri
Yes.
is not quite far from Ila, just about 2 hours
Mm-hmm.
away. They are both in the same Delta state of Nigeria, in southern Nigeria. So
Yes.
every Christmas since I was a child, we always go back home to meet my grandparents, to meet my cousins, another family setting. Almost the way Thanksgiving is in North America. So that is how the onward December is for us. So the entire month of December, after your holidays from
Mm-hmm.
school, we'll go and spend a number of weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks with my grandparents. Luckily for me, my grandparents were traditional African worshippers, even though my parents were Catholic. That is why
Mm-hmm.
I still have my understanding of spirituality is not narrow, is not streamlined to only one faith. because I was brought up in basically two faiths, the Catholic faith and my own African traditional religion of my grandparents and their ancestors.
Ancestors.
So
Yeah.
so one would go to the village, my grandparents, my grandma, my granddad would always tell us of all of these tales and stories that they too had heard, that they had heard as children from their own parents and
Oral
grandparents. So
storytelling. Yeah.
yes, so no, storytelling is the African way of our cultural preservation. Much of our African society was not literate. Although the Igbo culture did have the NCBD script, probably you've heard of it before, and a few other
No,
cultures have their own.
but
You've not heard of the
yes.
NCBD script?
No,
I
no.
believe in blank in Black Panther, that's the recent movie they had released last year. There are a few scenes in Wakanda where the NCBD script is very similar to the Egyptian hieroglyphics, probably
Oh,
stemming from there. We have no idea where it's stemming from because Igbo people themselves are not the original creators of the NCBD script. They had
okay.
inherited it from the Efik and Ibibio people east of Igbo land.
Because the Cameroonians, there's also a group in Cameroon that had their own
They have their own unique, yes, yes. So
transformative,
a
and
few
with
cultures,
the Asantes have the Edingra symbols, which each symbol has a meaning. And I always say, if allowed to, it will be a writing,
yes.
because when
No,
you
it
put it
was,
together, you can actually have a full sentence out of it. Yes.
yes. Almost as the Egyptian hieroglyphic was,
Yeah.
that was exactly how the Igbo NCBD, although the NCBD script is not exactly Igbo, just like I told you, we had
Yes.
inherited it was a new technology. But much of Igbo culture and much of African culture in general, we are not literate. So
Yes.
much of our cultural preservation is done through storytelling. And I
I
try
think
to
when
highlight,
we say literate, we need to qualify.
literate
Literate
being,
in the European sense that we reading and
we could
writing
do,
like the
yes,
European.
we didn't have written scripts.
Yes.
We didn't have written scripts. A number of cultures in Africa did though, like the
Yes.
NCBD script. But on the majority, I would say as much as 80% of our African cultures before the advent of the Europeans didn't really have written scripts. Much of the scripts we have in West Africa have come to us either from the Arabs or from
Yes.
the Europeans. So that storytelling sessions in the village are very pivotal for me learning about Ila, learning about my own clan of Ukumege, because my clan of Ukumege will have a rich tale, and in Tales of Zofa you had seen it. It is a story surrounding the character Edaike. In Tales of Edaike is also a reincarnation of
Of
Jideofor, as
Jideofor.
well
Yeah.
as Ikwa Ano. These are
Yes.
his past lives. These are his
Oh,
previous reincarnation. Because the story in Ukumege where I come from is that we are descended from a Benin prince,
okay.
from an Edo prince. Although we are Igbo people, but our
Yes.
original founding father is a Benin prince who was ousted from the palace and found his way to Igbo land in Ila. So in a sense, we are like the prodigal son of the Benin Empire. We are
Okay. Okay.
so
Now,
all of those
in
story, all of those history I had learned in my childhood from my grandparents.
beautiful. In your book, you actually delve into the trauma of slavery, and not you delve into the trauma of slavery, death, and disregard for the sacredness of human life.
Like yes,
Yes, yes. The what I want to ask you is, in your view, and this is going on a social context, if slavery, the enslavement of African people, had not happened, what do you think, or how would you perceive the Africa we have today?
today.
Yes.
That's quite a difficult question because I believe I told you that there are pros as well as cons to our meeting of the Europeans. So a few pros will be the formation of formal education as it is, because it wasn't quite common in African culture. The European concept of formal education. What we had in Igbo land, for example, was the apprenticeship system. There wasn't exactly a formal setting of education. That's part of the pros. We also inherited, of course, just like I said, written scripts. Most of our African cultures didn't have written scripts until we had met the Europeans and adopted the Latin scripts from them. So that is another pro. Then, of
Yeah.
course, the cons, and I believe the biggest con of all is that the slave trade era made us Africans to have this substandard view of our ancestors and our heritage, especially during the colonial era after the slave trade had ended. Today, I live on the continent, I live in Nigeria. Most of us still have this view that our ancestors are evil
Is
because that is
Jesus
what
Christ
we are told in
still
church.
that white image?
I didn't get that. Please
Is
repeat.
Jesus Christ still that white image?
Yeah, exactly, exactly, exactly. And Jesus is the savior, and your great grandfather is the demon. Me, I have been growing up in a family where we had African traditional worshippers, and of course, my parents are Catholic. I was brought up in the Catholic faith. Although in my family, we found a way to reconcile seemingly different faiths, but even as a child, I came to understand that spirituality transcended creed and
Yes.
religion and doctrine.
Yes.
So that the biggest con to me is this view Africans have of ourselves, and you can see it. I believe I was having a conversation yesterday with a lady. She's from Suriname. I believe I'm pronouncing it right. In
Yes,
South America,
Suriname. Yes.
Suriname. Although she lives in Florida in the US, we're having a conversation concerning African spirituality and how different our spirituality is with the advent of Christianity and Islam. Um, Part of the point I'm giving to her is what I'm giving to you now, which is this biggest problem I believe we had inherited from the slavery era, especially from colonialism, when the effort of educating us in the Christian way and in the English and the French and the Dutch and the Dutch way of society. We came to believe that our ancestors were evil people with a substandard culture, not just a
Yes.
substandard culture, but substandard spirituality,
Yes.
which is
But
a
we even
bloody
have a
lie.
culture.
Yes, that we are, thank you, that we are barbarians of some sort,
Yes.
which is a
Yes.
bloody lie. And I believe that is partly part of the reason why Africa is underdeveloped today. Because the saying is that if you sever if you disconnect the roots from
Yes.
the stem, the tree will die.
Yes.
African society is disconnected from its roots. It is the reason we are not flourishing. It's the reason we are withering, in a sense, because of this disconnect. Because I always say that if you think your father is a mumu, if you think your father is a stupid person, I believe you know what mumu means in Nigerian
Actually,
PG.
Mumu is also cross to Ghana. When I did a recap on Akan words in how do we call it thing, Mumu is deaf. Mumu is
Okay,
same spelling, different pronunciations. Yes,
okay, okay,
it's
okay,
across.
okay.
Somebody said, "Oh no, Mumu is only Nigerian and not Akan," but
I
it
can
cuts across
across
um,
in both in the
in
Nigerian
both
pidgin and in Akan.
in Akan,
So,
and then it is in Jamaican patois as well. So this
are you
conversation,
serious? There's mumu in Jamaican patois.
yes,
What does it mean in
yes,
Jamaican patois?
the same.
It means a buffoon.
Yes, a buffoon. Yes,
Are you serious?
yes, I'm serious. So whether it's Akan or it's Igbo, it is there.
Yeah, yeah, it has spread from Africa down there to the Caribbean
Exactly,
culture.
exactly.
So
Mhm.
the point is that if you think your father, if you think your grandparents, if you think your ancestors
Mhm.
are evil barbarians, the apple does not fall far from the tree. It
Mhm.
means you also must be an evil barbarian.
Mhm.
You have their genes flowing through you. You have all of their history flowing through you. So if you think they are evil and substandard, then you must be evil and substandard. So since we have this negative mindset of our ancestors, we are manifesting negativity in our African society. And we can
Mhm.
see it everywhere. It is glaring. This
Mhm.
of Jideofor in my own way was my own part of my attempt in
Mhm.
trying for modern day contemporary Africans to reconnect with their past, to
Mhm.
see a better image of their African past, of the
Mhm.
African ancestors. There was trade, there was commerce all over the continent, there was
Mhm.
technology. There's a
Mhm.
reason why the Benin art and the Leife art is all over the world.
Yes,
It
was
is to show
looted.
you how sophisticated we were before the Europeans came here. In many ways, I always say that for much of human history, Africa was at the very peak of civilization.
Mhm.
I believe I had seen a documentary where in the library of Timbuktu or so in the 13th and 14th century, where the understanding, and it was already a fact to West
Mhm.
Africans then already, that the Americas already existed.
Mhm.
And the Europeans had no idea until Columbus and the Vikings before Columbus. So if West Africans already knew that South America already existed, and it's not far fetched when you look at the map, Senegal is not
Yes,
much far off from Brazil. So
I
it is not.
think what you're saying is when the discoveries started from the European perspective, everywhere they met, they had seen people who were Africans or African, how do we call it, background in there who had come way before. And there's
Yes,
also the understanding that one of I forget who exactly it was. One of the during the Malian Empire,
yeah.
which empire was older, Ghana, Mali, or Songhai. One of
Ghana is
those,
the oldest. I believe it's the Mali Empire. That's
yes,
the king before Mansa Musa,
yes,
who
had
had
set
traveled to the Americas, where there's a
exactly.
written tale of his voyage to the Americas.
Yes, 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 yes. That is perfectly right. So and those are one of the things that really make your book resound for me, that there are such tales, there are such stories, narratives there that need to be told from an
Yes,
African look, from an African perspective, and looking out into the world.
outwards. Yes,
And this is the power of storytelling. For me, the reason why I engage in such conversations is that as a storyteller, what story are we telling the world about us? Who are we allowing to tell our stories?
our stories. Yeah,
And when I hear stories written from an African perspective by an African, grounded within the culture, the history, the people, I really respect what you do. And
thank you very
I
much.
will highly encourage you, do not stop. There was an older
Definitely.
generation of writers who are no longer, like Chinua Achebe and Wole Soyinka and all
Yeah,
the,
yeah.
how do you call it, Mecheta, Dems and whatnot.
Yes, yes,
That there
yes.
needs to be a newer generation,
A
which is
new
slowly,
generation. Yes.
yes, as they said, no longer at ease. We weren't at ease. Now we are. We are. A book that quickly jumped into my head. The first book I ever read or came across, the Palm Wine Drinkard.
Written by who?
Oh, I've forgotten his
Uh,
name, but it
okay.
was written in broken English. in
Are
Pigeon.
you serious? In Pigeon. That's very
Yes.
nice.
Google
That's
the
very
palm
nice.
wine drinker.
Palm
Yes,
wine
yes,
drinker
yes. It doesn't fall within Chino Achibes and all those people's writings, but
category. Yeah.
it is in a category of its own,
Of
and
his
it's a
own. Yeah.
light and it's funny, and it's also as the spirituality aspect of it cannot be lost. My friend, what are we looking forward to in the future?
Well, just like I told you, I'm ready. The follow-up story, those of Jideofor, is part of a trilogy. The very first book of the trilogy. The second book, Once Upon a Lifetime, is already in the works. So that will be published next year in 2024. I'll be in the UK by then for my master's. So that will be another
Hey,
opportunity.
okay,
My master's in entrepreneurship because I'm very interested in business as well. The way I have a
okay.
passion for writing, I also have a passion for fashion, which
Ah,
I'm hoping to manifest as well. I'm already on the
it is
journey of my
manifesting.
auto. It's amen.
Yes,
So I want to go to the UK to study business professionally, so I have a better understanding because I truly want because the business plan I have is for getting African fabrics. I can see you are so proud of your kente material on
yes,
your on your seat, you have it on your seat. So, and
yes,
I know how rare it is for Africans in diaspora to get these African fabrics, genuine, high quality African fabrics. So,
yes.
the business plan I have is for African attires and African fabrics. So, the way our music and movies are spreading, I want that as well to spread, including the food and all other aspects of our culture. So, I already
Okay.
have a business plan set up for when I'll be in the UK. So, once Upon a Lifetime is in the works. Then the audiobook for Tales of Jideofor being read
Yes.
by Dr. Etim Eyo of Nigerian Nostalgia Project is also in the works. In fact, it will be dropping in a number of weeks in this month of July. So that will be available as well on Audible because it seems folks these days prefer to listen to story. It is quite easier to listen to the stories than to read it yourself.
When
So
you driving, it's easier to listen when you driving or when you're doing something with your hands. The listening is
yes,
nice. But
yes, yes.
I am old school. Like my questions are in my little book or books. Yes. But I would have
So
loved to have, but then I read on my phone as well.
on your
So
phone as
yes, I read
well.
on my phone. Yes. But it would be nice to hear it being narrated via
No, you would
audio.
love it. You would love it. Dr. Etim, just like I told you, he has both a Nigerian and American accent, which was exactly what I'm gunning for. Because
Yes.
of course, much of the history of spirituality in Tales of Jideofor is not much of a big deal in Nigeria because people are quite aware of
Yes.
most of these tales. But of course, folks in diaspora, folks in the Caribbean have no idea. So they are my target market. They are the ones I really want to use Tales of Jideofor as a vehicle to connect them back to their African past, to their African history, so they have a better picture of their African ancestors, a better reality. Because what the Europeans had fed Africans after the slave trade is that we are savages, we are barbarians, which are all bullshit, which is an obvious lie when you do just a little fact checking.
Yeah. A last question before we leave. Have you at any point been confronted with a question that it was you Africans that sold us into slavery?
Yes, yes. And that was, in fact, that was also part of my motivation for writing Tales of the Dog. Because just as you had rightly mentioned, there are a lot of false myths surrounding the slave trade era, which I'm hoping Tales of the Jideofor would be one of those books out there helping to demystify the slave trade era. And part of this myth is this belief. Even us on the continent, we have this opinion. It feels to us as if the Europeans came down from their sail ships, from their boats, raided our villages and captured us,
Mhm.
which is a lie. It is not that is not exactly how it happened. It happened like that in a few places, I believe, in the in a few coasts. I believe when the Portuguese, because the Portuguese were
Started
the
all this.
originators. Yes, they started all of this. They started all of
Yes.
this. So when they had actually begun, they had obtained a few slaves through raiding in that manner, raiding a
Mhm.
few coastal settlements. But those were basically hamlets. Our
Mhm.
African city states and empires were in the hinterland, often
Yes.
away from the coast. So,
Mhm.
but over time, especially in the 18th century, where Tales of Jideofor is based, is setting, by then in the 18th century, over after 200 years of the business of slavery, it has, just as I said, it has become a merchant business
Mhm.
set up from production down to consumption stage. The Africans were the producers,
Mhm.
often for the rum, because in today's African culture now, rum is so common in our
Mhm.
traditional prayers for
Yes.
veneration of the gods, for
Mhm.
what's it called again? What's the English term for pouring drinks on the
Liba-
floor?
libation.
Libation. Yeah,
Yes.
yes. For libation and all of that. We didn't used to have rum. We used to use palm wine for that before.
And the
So
gods
how
were very
come
happy. They didn't get
they
drunk.
got
And
they
then
didn't get
listen,
drunk.
now we
They
make
didn't
them
get
drunk. And you say
now we
something,
give
they
them
have no idea what you said because they are drunk.
they are drunk.
Either palm wine
So
or water. Now we use
or
hard,
water or we had our own form of intoxicant. There was palm wine, there was honey beer in a few cultures, but we didn't have strong spirits or rum. All of
but
these
we,
are
we
coming.
we had a strong one, akpeteshi.
Yeah, in Nigeria, I believe you heard of Ogogoro before.
Yes,
Have you heard of
Ogogoro,
Ogogoro?
yes. Ogogoro, that's our
That's the locally
counterpart of
brewed
yes,
spirit. Yes,
akpeteshi,
locally
yes,
brewed spirit.
yes.
But again, too, in my research, I came to discover that Ogogoro is coming down from the. It is us trying to replicate the rum and the
Ah,
spirits, the whiskeys the Europeans were
yes.
giving. You know, Africans are quite ingenious people. When they brought the gun for us, we started making guns by ourselves. When they brought the rum for us, we started making the Ogogoro by ourselves. but but the general idea is that
Ogogoro is known here more like as moonshine.
moonshine, yes, moonshine. I know. So we started making Ogogoro for ourselves. But this impact of the slavery on our culture, we tend to view it as if we are just victims only.
Mhm.
Which is not exactly true. I believe there's this quote that said Africans were not enslaved in the Americas.
Mhm.
That Africans were enslaved on the continent
Mhm.
and then sold to Europeans who wanted slaves,
Mhm.
which is in a sense the truth of what had happened. And
Mhm.
Tales of Jideofor, in his own way, is trying to reveal that although chattel slavery, the way it was in North America especially, was non-existent in Africa, but we still had our own form of slavery and indentured servitude and caste systems and all of that. So it wasn't as if the Europeans came down here and raided our villages and took people. No,
Mhm.
there was a business built up where Africans would go to the hinterland, buy up slaves from the slave markets in the hinterland, and take them to the coast. How it got
Mhm.
so deep that kings would and warlords and princes would
Mhm.
often incite violences in different communities, different city
Just
states,
to.
so that the end result would be slaves. Because
Mhm.
afterwards the captives will be taken
Yes.
away as slaves. They'll be made to be slaves and taken to the coast to be sold to the Europeans. Because I believe I pointed that out in Tales of Jideofor as well. Because we had formed this addiction for the rum
And and the
and the third
third
novel.
novel. Thank
Thank you very much. Thank